Welcome and good evening. Thank you so much for coming. If you, Karina, if you're going to take that out, you're going to have to stand there because they're coming in.
You want me to leave it up then?
Yeah, for a few more minutes. Okay, my name is Barbara Cooper, and I'm the chair of the Fidalgo Democrats. Thank you for joining the Fidalgo Democrats in person at the library. We had been on Zoom for about 3 years, and this is our third in-person meeting. So thank you all for coming. We have a sign-in sheet. We ask folks to sign in. Please put in your email. And if you haven't been receiving our notifications, if you give us your email, Rita Sullivan will put you on our list. And then you'll get the notices. Let's see. I was going to remind you all to please turn off your cell phones. Do the same. Okay. If somebody absolutely has to talk to me, they can't. The front door of the library is locked, so when you leave, you have to leave through the side doors. If you go through that middle door, the bathrooms are around the back there. I think most of the people have been in the place, but you have to come back in through here. Just to let you know, there's some lovely cookies and coffee. Rita Sullivan has made that. Yay for Rita. And so we have hot water and some decaf coffee. I just wanted to mention the heat. The problem we have is that they're working on the boiler system here, and so this room last time got a little cold. So if you see me putting on my jacket, that's why. They said they were going to hopefully have it fixed, but we'll see. So I apologize in advance.
My understanding is they won't turn it on for political. There's so much hot air already.
Ryan, what are you going to do about it?
Close the door.
Yeah, we're going to close the door in a minute. People are coming and going with the equipment. That's the problem. If you want to stand there and turn it open and close it, that would be great. But I'd like to explain who the Fidalgo Democrats are. We're an independent democratic association with a focus on education. I'd like to remind people we are not a PAC. We cannot endorse candidates or contribute to their campaigns. We don't charge dues, but we pass the hat. So if you feel like contributing later, that would be great. We'd like to start the meeting with an acknowledgement. We, the Fidalgo Democrats, acknowledge that we gather on indigenous land, the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Samish and Swinomish people, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. Our next meeting will be April 11th, and details to follow. We are planning on meeting in person in the library. So, before I introduce the speakers, are there any Democratic Party officials, any PCOs? Please stand up and introduce yourself. We have Ryan Walters, who's on a city council. And then, what else do we have? Oh, there, hi. So do you want to stand up and introduce yourself?
Sure. Carolyn Moulton, Anacortes City Council. Nice to see everyone.
Thank you. Thank you both for coming. And,
Former elected sheriff.
oh, that's right. Well, thank you as well. Do you want to stand up and make sure we know who you are? Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. Anybody else that would like to be introduced? Okay. Missed your opportunity. I'd also like to thank Don Ambrose, who edits the Skagit Democrats newsletter, because he always puts in a lot of information about what's going on, not just with the Fidalgo Democrats, but it's a wonderful newsletter. So if you don't get it, get on their website, Skagit Democrats, and you can sign up for it. You won't be disappointed. It's really good. And Carol and Rick Tamler do a Whidbey Island newsletter. So let me, almost done. Zane Butler is recording the meeting, and that will be available on a YouTube channel. And so Rita Sullivan will work with Zane and get it sent out to our mailing list. And then you just click on the button and you can see the YouTube. If you know anybody who's interested and didn't make the meeting, please let them know that that's available and you can forward the email that you get. And so let me start with move to the meeting itself. The focus of the meeting is public safety. And we have two speakers that I'd like to introduce. They're running around right at the moment. This is Chief Bill Harris, who is the chief of the fire department, and Dave Floyd is the chief of police, and he should be coming in at some point. And then in the back there, we have Chris Beyer, who is a firefighter, as well as the head of the firefighters union. It's called Anacortes Professional Firefighters, number 1537. And just as a bit of information, Chris was born and raised in Anacortes. So he's a hometown guy. So since I can introduce you, Chief Harris, as long as you're here. He sent me a bio using in first person, so I'm going to read it as if he's reading it. I started my fire service career as a volunteer firefighter EMT with the city of Dallas, Oregon in 1995. While there, I completed paramedic training at Chemekala. It's a hard, sorry guys, Community College in Salem, Oregon, and was hired as a career firefighter paramedic by the city of Sunnyside, Washington in 1999. At Riverside, I held the positions of firefighter, captain, and battalion chief. While there, I earned a BS in Fire Service Administration from Eastern Oregon University. I left Sunnyside in April of 2021 when I accepted the position of fire chief here in Anacortes. I moved to town with my wife Tanya and children Brett, Riley, and Paige. So this is Chief Bill Harris, and he's going to be one of the presenters. And we're still waiting to see if we can get Dave Floyd and the World of Electronics working in a comfortable manner. Okay, so I'll have you start. If you can't hear, let me know, we can turn it louder.
I'm confident someone will yell at me to speak into the mic, because I get that every time, so, all right. Right, so tonight, Chief Floyd and I are here to talk to you about our departments, how we're organized, some of the challenges that we're being faced with, and how we're working to meet those. After we go through each of our respective departments, we're going to go over some of the common questions that are being asked in regards to Proposition 1, which is, I think, why most of you are here to listen tonight. For the most part, not for the most part, Chief Floyd and I are here to give you an objective overview of the issues and what we're looking at. We're not part of the Vote Yes committee. We're not here to ask you to vote one way or the other. We're just here to educate you so that you can make an informed okay? Any questions before we go? Except I need to talk into the mic louder. Got it, okay, all right. So first I'll start with the fire department and how we're organized. So at the fire department, there's 3 chief officers, there's 25 line staffs, that's captain, lieutenant, and firefighters. We have a community paramedic who's with us here tonight, an administrative assistant, and currently we have 3 volunteer firefighters who also work shifts and help out the career staff. Currently we have 7 more that are in training, volunteers, again to help augment, and we'll talk about that a little bit later about how we staff our engines and why having those volunteers helps out just a little bit. One thing I want to point out is those 25 folks are the people that you see. When you call 911, it's those men and women that respond to your home or your emergency to help take care of you. But there aren't 25 working at any given time. To work, we cover, obviously, the city 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And to do that, we divide those 25 personnel into 3 platoons. So there's 8 or 9 people scheduled on any given day. But with scheduled time off, sick, vacation, all the other things that go along with that, and just trying to keep that schedule full every day, that turns into 6 personnel every day. The thing I kind of want to mention before we get too deep into it is that our firefighters are more than just firefighters. Obviously, if we have a building fire, that's who's coming. If we have an ambulance emergency, every firefighter is a trained and certified paramedic or EMT. So they're staffing both the ambulances and the fire engines. But beyond that, they're also your wildland firefighters, they're your rescue technicians, they're your marine rescue techs, rope rescue techs. They're the people that will cut apart cars to get people that are trapped inside. If there's building inspections, they're the folks that are out doing them. When there aren't emergencies going on, they spend a lot of time in the schools and other public education programs, letting people know, training our children how to be safe and what to do in case of an emergency. So they're doing a ton of things out there beyond just the fire and EMS where you normally would see them. Back to kind of how we're organized, and I mentioned there's 6 people every day working. Well, those 6 people aren't down here. Everyone's familiar with Station 1 right downtown. There's only 2 people in Station 1. Because of our geography, the city of Anacortes covers all the way. We have a station out in March's Point on Molly Lane, and then Station 2 is out at Anaco Beach and Oaks that covers primarily the Skyline area. In addition to the city limits, they also respond for fire and EMS to all of Fidalgo Island, Guimas Island, some of the unreachable islands, and also western Skagit County from Bayview to the Connor on a normal day. So they're out there doing a bunch. In addition to, there was only 2 people I mentioned in every station, 2 firefighters. But if you drive past Station 1, you see 3 bays, and they're double stacked. So you'll see a ladder truck, a fire engine, 2 medic units, a rescue truck. Well, those aren't all staffed. Here, because there's only 2 personnel, what we do is what's called cross-staffing, which means that whichever emergency comes first is what gets handled. So if there's a medical call, those 2 firefighters will walk out, get in the ambulance, and drive away to handle your emergency, but that leaves all those other pieces of apparatus I talked about unstaffed and out of service. So one thing I just want to, because when you drive by, we get asked a lot of times, there's all these people here. Well, there's not. We have the apparatus to respond to different types of emergencies, but still only 2 people at each station on any given day. This goes way faster without the slideshow. One of the other issues that we're facing, or this kind of drives all the other problems we're going to talk about tonight, is our call volume. Over the past 10 years, our call volume has risen by 60%. So in 2012, it was 2,690 some calls. Last year, it was 4,317. That creates a number of issues. In addition to the fact that we have all of those calls, they're not spread out evenly. If they could be, if we could time them and plan for them, we could probably handle most of those calls in a timely manner with the personnel we have. The problem is overlapping calls. In 2022, there were 899 times when there were at least 2 calls going on at any given time. There were 155 times when there were 3 calls and 12 times when there were 4 calls. With only 3 stations, you can imagine that doesn't work super well. There were at least 2 incidents in 2022 when the first arriving ambulance came from the Burlington Fire Department. And you can imagine that's a long time to wait for an ambulance. So those are some of the issues that we're trying to solve. Of those 4,300 calls, and this changes a little bit from year to year, but about 83% are EMS calls. So we're running a tremendous amount of EMS, about 70% are fires. And of those fire calls, last year in 2022, 26 of them were structure fires. And I kind of point that out because that's kind of our big deal events that takes everybody we can put our hands on or get us to come help. Of those 26, 13 were in the city limits, 13 were outside. And that's important to note because we were far away from help. Obviously, Burlington, Cedro Woolley, Mount Vernon, they're a long ways away. Here on the island, there's the city of Anacortes is the only career fire department. We have districts 11 and 13, which is Hope Island, or excuse me, Summit Park and Mount Airy, that are all volunteer departments, but we respond with each other. They come to help us. It takes them a while to assemble and come, but at the same time, in exchange for that, we respond to all of their calls. Most every fire that happens outside the city limits gets both an engine and a medic unit from the city to go out and support those calls. So look, and I talked about the staffing, so there's 2 people downtown, 2 people in March's Point, and 2 people in Skyline. Another, we have to do that because it's important, and you can imagine if you've ever called 911, you want someone there right now. If someone's not breathing or having trouble breathing or bleeding or anything like that. So we keep 2 personnel in every station, and we try very hard to get on scene within 4 minutes from the time that 911 is called. That's kind of our goal. So we'll let him in. Which I'm going to pause just a second. Some of these slides make it a little better to see. Great time for coffee.
So when you get a call and there's 2 people on duty, do they both go out, or does one stay at the station and one go out?
Yeah, no, so that's, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but I can just kind of cut ahead. So not most. Some of our calls, for medical calls, every call gets at least 2 people. We always operate in teams of 2. So for BLS, or basic life support, which means EMT level calls, which are usually not life-threatening, not always. Usually some of our lower acuity calls, we send 1 ambulance or 1 medic unit with 2 personnel in that. Okay. But I'm going to show you some graphics along with that, so I'm going to hold on. Any other questions while we're waiting?
No, that's not the one, that's the one.
Great way to fill the time. You can tell a story. Yeah.
This is a burning question that I have all the time about fire. For as long as I can remember, we've had things burn on the top of the stove. We turn it on high, people are going to be right there, and then, 20 minutes later, the smoke blowing. I think a lot of fires happen because of stuff that goes on at the stove. And I don't know why there has not been a stove that's been created that you can set a timer for 5 minutes, and it goes off in 5 minutes. I don't want it goes ding when I'm back in the bedroom or I stepped outside to talk to somebody and then I completely forgot about it being on high. And I don't know why we cannot buy a stove, we cannot buy a burner, we can't buy anything that has a timer on it.
I have no idea. I'm afraid I can't answer that one. I don't know why they haven't.
I had an audience that heard that too, because
I know
I
that.
mind a lot every time I'm in the
So
kitchen
would it
working.
go off when the timer went off, not just, so you have to
Set
run
the
it?
timer to go off in 5 minutes or 20 or 30 or an hour, whatever the time is that you.
I think you can hook that to Alexa now. You should. You can hook that to Alexa. Just tell Alexa to set a timer for 5 minutes.
I think you can buy induction before.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know. Those are well outside my area of expertise, I'm
Hearing what
afraid.
you said.
You can buy induction cooktops that have a timer on it. And you just set it for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or
Does
whatever.
it go off? Does
And it will
the
go
heat
off.
get turned off
And
then?
it shuts it off in 5 minutes.
Well, I don't know what machine you're talking about, but I know these stoves that have 4 burners on them and an oven do not have that.
Okay.
All used.
All right. We'll kind of get back on track here. I think the chief of police is here, so I'm going to introduce him and step over here. Chief Floyd began his career with the Anacortes Police Department as a patrol officer in 2000. In his tenure at the Anacortes Police Department, Chief Floyd has served as a field training officer, Marine Patrol officer, Bike Patrol officer, defensive tactics instructor, and detective on the Skagit County Interlocal Drug Enforcement Unit, and a patrol sergeant, where he served as the Canine Program Coordinator and Bike Patrol Coordinator. Chief Floyd was promoted to administrative captain in February of 2018. In that capacity, he supervised the administrative division of the Anacortes Police Department, which includes Anacortes Police Department training, professional standards, accreditation, and special investigations. He was promoted to Chief of Police in August of 2021. Captain Floyd has a Bachelor of Arts and Science degree in Public Affairs from Washington State University. He was born and raised in Vancouver, Washington. As far as the logistics, we have another microphone, so when we start, when people have questions, we'll bring, Candace is going to bring the mic around so that people can hear the questions that you have. If you can't hear them, just let us know, and either Chief Harris or Chief Floyd can repeat the questions. So I'm going to turn this back. Are you going to?
Yes, ma'am.
There you go. They're ready to start again. Great.
All right, this will be way better. Nate can look at that instead of me. So I'm just going to back up just a little bit and kind of show how our station responses are organized. So you can see Station 2 out there in the reddest skyline. Station 1 downtown covers all of what you see in turquoise. And the city limits portion of Station 3 is what you see in blue. And the reason that's their areas is that if they're in quarters, that's going to be the closest and fastest unit to get to an emergency within that zone. That's why it's mapped out that way. But all those areas in the white are still our responsibility primarily, or primary responsibility for EMS response. And also we respond on every fire, like I mentioned, into all of those areas and quite a bit more. Click. Back up one more. So I talked a little bit earlier just about the BLS calls and how we only send one unit. And one thing I want to point out there is we only send one unit, not because it's the best thing to do, but because it's necessity. So we kind of, I guess in a sense, play the odds a little bit. Because they're generally of a lower acuity, we send the single unit first, hoping to leave the stations 2 and 3 units, or whichever station it is. I'm using Station 1 calls as an example here. We send one unit, hoping they can handle the call and leave everyone else in service to handle whichever call may come next. That being said, it's not good for the patients, no matter what. It takes personnel to move people that are sick or that are heavy or injured or whatever it may be up and down stairs. It puts the patients and crews at some level of risk. The more people we can put on scene, the better. Four is far superior. So the reason I'm using Station 1 as an example is, and I was just getting to it when I was talking before the slides, but even though we have to spread our personnel out amongst all 3 stations for that 4-minute first response, 57% of our calls happen in the Station 1 area. There's a number of assisted living, most of our population is in that area, but there's also assisted living facilities, nursing homes, hospitals, so we run a lot more calls downtown than the rest of the city combined. So that's one of the issues that we're working to solve. Go ahead. Our advanced life support calls, which are about 60% of our medical calls, are generally, they require a paramedic, they require advanced interventions, are much more likely to be life-threatening or critical. So in that case, we send 2 units on initial dispatch. So for example, again, if it was inside the Station 1's area, the medic unit from Station 1 responds and the engine from Station 2 will respond to assist them. Between Station 1 and 2, there are about 2,000 ALS calls a year. So 2,000 times a year, at least 2 units are committed to those calls. And you'll see, I turned them gray in this slide so you can see that that portion of the city and all of that the rest of the portion of the main island are now unprotected or will have an extremely delayed response. You can imagine if you live out in the Skyline area and call 911 at this point in time, the closest medic unit's going to be coming from Molly Lane. So you're looking at a 15 to 20 minute drive, depending on ferry traffic and things like that, to get out there. One thing so I talked earlier about the 899 overlapping calls. So anytime that happens, that would also pull the Station 3 unit out of service as well. Well, I shouldn't say anytime, a lot of times. A total of 275 times in 2022, we were what we call level 0, which means that every unit in Anacortes was committed to a call and there was nobody left to respond if and when another call comes in. So, and that's not good for anybody. I put that little graphic down there in the bottom just to to let you know that I mentioned earlier that we want to respond to all of your emergencies within 4 minutes. It's not just an arbitrary number, it's not something we made up. When someone's having a heart attack or a stroke specifically, or any other critical emergency, time equals life, time equals muscle, whatever it may be, and you'll see the outcome. I can't read that far from here, but you'll see the outcome quickly diminishes once you pass that 4 minute mark. If you were to graph it out on a line chart, it dramatically decreases after 6 or 8. Okay. So far we've talked about EMS calls. I do want to touch on fire a little bit. The NFPA, or the National Fire Protection Association, calls for 16 or 17 firefighters to be on scene within 8 minutes at a residential structure fire. We only have 6 personnel on duty at a given time, so that's not likely to happen. The City Council passed in 2016 Resolution 1946, which is based off of a different, more primarily volunteer standard for firefighters. And that calls for 12 firefighters to be on scene within 11 minutes. That's a more attainable goal, but as you can see in the yellow line, in 2022, we averaged 6.5 firefighters on scene within, should say 11 minutes there, and a total of 10.3 firefighters total over any amount of time. So that's all we've ever mustered. Even that Resolution 1946 standard of the 12 firefighters in 11 minutes, that we've never met that to date. Another thing that I want everyone to understand is that we 2-person engine companies, 2-person medic units. Washington state law does not allow us to enter a burning building under normal circumstances with less than 4 personnel on scene. If we know for a fact that there's someone inside, we'll make entry with 3 personnel on scene. But again, there's only 2 personnel in that first arriving engine. So even though they get there within 4 minutes, they can't come inside to get you or to put your fire out until the second engine arrives by law. Okay, so then you're looking at 7 to 12 minutes depending on where that fire occurs in town. Again, I don't think you need a graphic to tell you this, but I threw it on there anyway. But the longer that you stay inside of a burning building, the less likely it is you're going to survive it. Okay, so there's way more to that statistic, but we'll keep moving. Any questions about the fire responses before we move on to the PD? Yes, sir.
Yeah, where's your 911 personnel at where you call 911? Is it here in Anacortes?
No, sir. The 911 center is in Mount Vernon on College Way.
Remind me again of the BLS is AF something and B something?
Yeah, BLS is basic life support. That's EMT level medical care, and ALS is advanced life support and paramedic level care. Okay. Unfortunately, then I'll turn it over to Chief Floyd.
Okay, well, I appreciate everyone's patience while we got a working laptop here. I know the visual graphics help illustrate some of this. Chief Harris and I should be able to do this in our sleep now. This will be our 6th presentation in 10 days, but I'll use the visual aids to get through. So we have 28 commissioned staff that's currently authorized for the police department. That's broken down, 3 in administration, chief, I have 2 captains, and we have a detective sergeant, corporal, 2 general crimes detective spots, spot of the drug task force, And then we have, for our 3 patrol shifts for 24-hour coverage, we have a sergeant, a corporal, and 4 patrol officers that would be assigned to each shift. For the non-commissioned side, just for your information, we also have our animal control officer that does code enforcement and parking up until we get our new half-time parking position hired here in a couple months. I have a community service officer that does our crime prevention and handles managing our volunteers, record service manager, and 4 records clerks. So again, 24-hour day, 7-day week coverage with those staff. So with some of the more complex calls that we're seeing now, some of the legislative mandates that came out in 2021, as far as how we're handling calls, how we're handling individuals in crisis, it takes additional staffing. And then, as I explained, to cover a 24-hour schedule, 7 days a week, you quickly use up the staffing that you have allocated. So it sounds like a fair amount until you start trying to cover all those shifts. Also, our biggest resource is people. So life happens, we have vacation time, sick time, we have state mandated training to cover. And when you account for all that, that usually is about 20% of your total staffing that you can, at any one time, may be unavailable. Too fast. We have currently 5 open positions, so those are shown here in the red. And I'm happy to tell you that we're seeing a lot of success here in the last couple months. We have 3 conditional job offers out right now, and so that'll help a fair amount, but it's not adequate enough to cover the staffing challenges that we're seeing. As we're seeing crime rates rise, there'll be a slide coming up. That's one thing that we can do proactively. So the increased officer presence equals a crime deterrent, lower crime rates. If we deter the crime from happening, that's a crime we don't have to prosecute and someone that we don't have to pay to incarcerate. So investment up front is substantially cheaper on the back end. So I included this just for reference. This is the de-escalation section out of the RCW. That's our state laws. So in 2021, there was a new standard for police use of force called the reasonable care standard. One of the principal components of that is de-escalation. In the de-escalation, our state legislature had some recommendations that I think are actually pretty good, frankly. But that called for slowing down the evolution of a lot of these calls, taking more time on scene, taking as much time as it necessary to try to resolve that incident with lower level use of force or just no use of force at all. The other thing that they recommended was, while you're slowing the evolution of that incident down, take that time to get additional resources to the scene. Additional resources include behavioral health professionals, crisis intervention teams, visiting crisis responders. Many of those things are much more available in the central parts of the county, but out here at the extreme end, probably very similar to the east end of the county in Concrete, those resources are a little more tough to come by. And so commonly what we are relying on is the additional officers on scene that the legislature also recommended. Councilman Walters has a great example that he used at a previous council meeting. An individual here at the library experiencing a crisis. The library needed that individual removed because it was interfering with the other citizens' ability to use the library. Fortunately for us, that call came at a shift change. So our day shift and swing shift are overlapping. We had 5 officers available to go to that call and resolved it peacefully. The individual saw that there was a significant response from our department and agreed voluntarily just to leave on his own. We took him up to the hospital, got him hooked up with the doctor on duty and trying to address the crisis that he was experiencing. Had that been a 1 or 2 officer response, it probably would have been a dramatically different outcome. So that's just a good illustration of why having more individuals at that scene gives us a better chance to resolve that peacefully. So this illustrates some of our property crime statistics for 2022. I'll show, maybe difficult to see, but 2022 is all in green. So you can see nearly every category except for fraud is substantially up. And these are the crimes of opportunity that I referenced earlier. These are things that we can, in many cases, deter with just increased officer presence. You know, these folks are looking for crimes that they can commit with low likelihood of being caught, and just the mere presence of an officer there significantly impacts these crime rates. And when we can, again, stop that before it occurs, it's much cheaper on the other end because we don't have to pay to incarcerate those individuals. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the top calls for service. We have serious crimes over here on the right, and those are drug violations is probably arguably not the most serious crime. However, I can tell you that I can connect the drug crimes to nearly every other crime classification. So it has significant impact on our violent crime rates and our serious crime rates. What I want to show with this is, even with the staffing challenges that we've seen, Anacortes officers are working very hard for your safety, and we are still one of the most safe cities in the state, as illustrated by our low violent crime rate. So we've been able to mitigate a lot of these with backfilling vacancies on our shifts with some overtime and stuff like that, but that's just not a sustainable model to continue working. It leads to increased officer burnout rates, and then we run into retention issues, which is a losing battle. This is just an example from our patrol schedule. So, as I mentioned earlier, we have a sergeant, corporal, and 4 officers assigned to each shift. And last week, out of the 6 people assigned to that shift, on our day shift, I had 2 actual officers working the entire city. So we had 1 at training, and 3 of them were on their days off because I can't work them 7 days a week. Subsequently, this Thursday, same shift, same crew working, 4 of them are on duty. Now, with our request that we have with the Prop 1 levy is to stabilize those staffing rates, more consistency, additional officers on working, and increased presence, allowing officers to do case follow-up, increase our case closure rates, proactively patrol, address those crimes of opportunity, and then traffic safety. A lot of these things are items that we've just not been able to focus on with the staffing challenges we have. I put this up just because everyone recognizes when they call 911, our patrol officers respond. They're the most visible part of the police department, but there's so much more that we do than just patrol response. You know, down in the bottom corner there, it shows the traffic hazard we had with the king tides earlier this year. The officer went out to check that traffic hazard. Once he got out there to see what the issue was, now he's needing to manage traffic, and he's stuck out there until the tides recede because there was no other access back to town. All the routes had the same issue with the king tides. Fortunately, we had 4 officers working that day. One of them got stuck on the other side coming into work, so we had 2 on the east end of town and then 2 for the entire rest of the city. Also, these photos illustrate some of the state mandated training we're required to do, and most importantly, engagement with our community partners and residents, because we recognize we're not big enough to address all these issues on our own. We rely on a lot of help from community partners and from you all calling when you see something that needs attention. So not being able to be everywhere at once, those are relationships that we have to continue to build. So at this point, Chief Harris and I have put together some of the most frequent questions we get regarding the levy lift. And first thing is, what is Proposition 1? So this is a request for a single year levy, and it'd be utilized to hire 5 officers and 8 firefighter medics. The levy, property tax is a little bit confusing. So the city's allowed to collect 1% more than they did the previous year annually without approval of the voters. And that's essentially what we're presenting to you now, is a request for you to vote if you support it beyond that 1%. This illustrates the last 10 years and the allowable increase at 1% each year. So we have an 11% that the money coming into the city has increased to support the public safety and all the other general fund positions in the city. At the same time, our cumulative inflation increase is over 30%. So I'm not great at math, but even I recognize those two things don't work. And our council, every year, Chief Harris and I and chiefs that came before us have asked for increased public safety staffing. And our council every year has to balance the needs of public safety and funding every other thing that is available here in Anacortes. And most of those are the reasons why we live here: the parks, the forest lands, the libraries. We don't want to sacrifice any of those things for the increased public safety that we really need. So another very confusing part is what happens to your tax money. So out of the money that you spend on taxes, for property taxes, 31% of that goes to the state, 25% of that goes to the school district, the county receives 13%, the city receives 13%, 9% goes to the hospital, and the remaining 9% is a combination of Medic 1, the port, the pool, conservation districts. They combine for that last 9%. So the portion that we get of your property taxes is not that big. What does this mean to you? The current proposal is 36 cents per $1,000 of assessed valuation. So for perspective, if your home is valued at $650,000, it's less than $20 a month. It's $19.50. And the graphic on your right shows where Anacortes falls with the other cities in Skagit County as far as your property tax rates.
Quick question. If I understood you, we're both new to Anacortes. It's a one-time increase. The question is, it's a one-time increase in the property tax, lifting the lid once. With the gap that you're talking about, how does that close that gap?
So that allows, and some of that stuff we'll get into here in just a second. So maybe we'll answer these questions and we'll circle back around if your question isn't answered.
Okay.
Just to kind of the short answer is, in a sense, it doesn't. What it is, it resets the levy. So say, this is a made-up number, say it's $10 million this year. We reset it, say, yeah, $2 million, that becomes 12, and that becomes the baseline in the future years for the 1% growth. So the single year levy limit simply means that we make that big bump once. In Washington State, levies can be up to 6 years, where for more than 1%, it'll get bigger for a number of years.
You're changing the basis.
You're changing the base one time. So their question is, how would we utilize those 8 firefighters? I mentioned earlier, back in one of the early slides, that there's 25 currently, and so that means 2 shifts of 8 and 1 shift of 9. That's kind of a leftover from an expansion in 2019. These 8 would make 3 shifts of 11. So just a point, I've been asked a number of times, where would all these people sleep at the fire station, and where would they live? So, but it's not 8 per day. So those 8 personnel are divided amongst those 3 shifts to balance it out. And mathematically, 11 personnel per shift will actually equal 8 per day. Because again, those same personnel need time. They have vacation days, sick days, all those things. So it'll equal 8. Okay? And what the intent is to utilize them for is to put at Station 1, instead of having 2 personnel in 1 unit, we'd have 4 personnel in 2 units. And that does a number of things for us. If you go back to those slides I showed you where I was graying out the areas, if there's an ALS call in the Station 1's area, then those 2 units would respond together to put 4 personnel on scene. But it would allow the Stations 2 and 3 personnel to stay in service, available to respond within 4 minutes to the next emergency that happens in their areas. If a critical call were to happen out in Skyline, then obviously the Skyline unit's going to respond first to get there as quickly as possible. One of the 2 units from downtown would flow out to there to provide that extra manpower to help get people downstairs and provide critical interventions and do that sort of work. But when they do that, there will still be 1 unit with 2 personnel left downtown for that immediate 4-minute response. And that's really a big deal. As the fire chief, as I'm sitting in my office or I'm at home at night listening to how the calls are going, we get lucky a lot. There are times, and of those 275 times, there were a few really bad outcomes. There were a few really long delays, but we can't rely on luck. So getting that other unit back in this quarters will make a big difference in how we respond to emergencies in the future. Okay? And overall, that's just going to reduce our response times. It's also going to add at least 2 more personnel onto those fire responses we talked about.
I have a question. How do you determine when somebody calls in how important it is to get out there quick? Like, who talks to them? Like, if it's a wife thinking that her husband's having a heart attack.
Are you familiar with the Magic 8 Ball? No, I'm kidding. So it's actually, so our 911 center adopted a program that's called ProQA. And if you've ever called 911, it can be a little bit frustrating for the caller because there's a series of questions. And as they go through these series of questions, level of consciousness, is the patient breathing, and it just gets deeper. And then every answer will take them to another series of questions that are more tailored to that specific complaint. And so they're trained to get those answers out. There's a little bit of, I won't call it guesswork, but some educated guesses maybe that goes into that. And they basically classify them in 5 different levels, alpha through echo, and that will determine what level of response it gets.
So where is the 911 situated? Where are they?
They're in Mount Vernon.
And are they staffed properly?
No, they're having a staffing shortage as well. They have a lot of personnel on overtime. So no, they're not.
Maybe mention that they dispatch for the entire county.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's not just City of Anacortes, and it's not just fire departments. It's everybody. Police departments. They contact the fire marshals, Department of Emergency Management. They cover it all. Yeah.
Wow.
I've not had that question. Good one. Yes, ma'am.
My question is for the police chief. You said that you police the city of Anacortes. I don't know that. Does that include the whole island?
It does not. So
who's doing the rest?
the south end of the island is patrolled by the Skagit County Sheriff's Office. And, they deploy their units where they have the greatest call volume. So it's not frequent that there's somebody over here from the Sheriff's Office. They do have people based in LaConner a lot of times, or they have an office in Bayview. But that's still a longer response time. It's not uncommon for them to ask for us to assist on some of their calls if they're coming from a ways out. So, and that actually leads me to another point I wanted to make. So one thing that's dramatically different about Anacortes compared to the other cities in Skagit County, if Mount Vernon, Burlington, Cedar Woolley, any of them have a big incident, they can shift some of their resources and manpower towards that and still cover their areas of responsibility fairly effectively. We have significant geographic challenges, so it's going to be a little bit longer response time if we ask for assistance from a lot of those agencies. The closest agency that we have to rely on outside of our own capabilities is the Swinomish Police Department. And I will tell you that their staffing levels are in much more dire situation than ours. Out of 16 authorized positions, they currently have 7. So it's not likely that I'm going to get a lot of assistance from the Swinomish Police Department. It's something that we're all struggling with statewide. All agencies are really trying to get additional staffing. A lot of that was just individuals that left the profession in our state when some of the laws came out in 2021 and they were frustrated. We've done a decent job of trying to increase our recruiting efforts and bring those numbers back up, but it's a process and it takes a while. So, as far as how I'm going to use 5 officers if we get that, well, as you probably saw from our presentation, the focus for us really would be on patrol level staffing. The individuals that are responding to 911 calls when you call and need assistance. That's going to help us reduce response times. Excuse me, it's going to have help us have individuals that are available for that proactive policing, for crime prevention, and really having enough personnel to safely do the de-escalation techniques that are requested as part of our legislative changes in 2021. And another thing is reducing the amount of overtime that we're asking folks to work, because that leads to officer burnout. Just, you know, it's something that everybody can relate to. If you're asked to work all the time on your time off, your burnout rate is a lot higher. And there is agencies all over the state that fight this battle, and they try to cover their staffing shortages with overtime, and individuals don't stay at those agencies. They get their 2 years in after they get sent to the academy, and they're going to transfer to an agency that has a little bit better setup for their personal situation. We call them training ground agencies. I don't want to be a training ground for another department to benefit the investment I put into somebody. Right now, it costs me $4,300 for every person I send to the academy, and that's just my part. The rest is subsidized by the state. So that's a significant impact on our training budget if every 2 years people that we hire want to leave. We've been really fortunate here. We haven't had those turnover issues. It's pretty rare that we have somebody that leaves our agency and goes to another agency in Washington State. I think that's because we've done a fantastic job of supporting our staff. We have great community support that we enjoy, a lot higher than some of the other areas in the state. And I think that's because we've worked really hard for the good reputation that we have with our community.
Question?
I have a firefighter question.
I'm not qualified to answer that one.
So on the 4th of July, I see truck after truck from the refinery. Why are they not involved in even, let's say that when there was this high tide at Sharp's Corner? Why are they only in Anacortes when there's a 4th of July parade?
That's a good question. So the refinery fire brigade, well, their fire engines look very much like ours. They're not set up the same. Their personnel, they're not trained. They're not EMTs. They're not trained to fight building fires. They're trained that's very specific to the refinery fires and the challenges they face. That being said, we do work together. We train together a little bit. They're willing to come off on occasion, but they don't generally fit into our response models. If that makes sense. Yes, sir. This could be a hard one.
I get to ask him too. So the corollary, because I know it has come up, how do you respond inside the refinery fence?
Yeah, so hopefully we don't. So they're set up to handle the gasoline and oil fires. They have the appropriate foam capabilities. They have much different types of fire engines to handle those. Or we would respond in a support role, medical transport, things like that. We can do water supply. And of course, if they have buildings out there too, if they were to catch on fire, then we respond and deal with the routine type fires.
I have a question. What percentage of your budget at the end of the year is overtime?
I think by percentage here. I know that last year we spent right around 500,000, about 10%.
In overtime?
Yeah.
Yeah, are you, one question for the police department. Are you actually budgeted for overtime, or do you have a budget for that? Or can you foresee what the budget's going to be in the future for overtime for your, for the loss of people to actually do the job?
Yeah, so the question is there a way for us to forecast what overtime costs are going to be for the year? Some of that is predictable just based on what the staffing levels are and how many vacancies we have. There's a number of factors where we can't predict, major incidents, or, frequently if we're at minimum staffing, we're at a 2-person shift, and we respond to a call where there's a mandatory arrest, a domestic violence arrest, or someone that has their second or subsequent DUIs. Those are mandatory bookings, so we have to take them to Mount Vernon, to the jail. I'm going to have to bring somebody on overtime to do that transport, because our 2-person minimum requires both of those individuals be in the city. That's for call response efficiency, and it's also for safety. Domestic violence call is a 2-person response. And so if somebody was out of the city on a jail transport, and then we had another domestic violence call come in, that's just really an unsafe situation for the officer responding and for the individuals that are at that scene. So we really want to eliminate those. Yes, ma'am.
So you do not have a jail here?
We do not have a jail, nor do I want to have a jail, because that is very labor intensive. There is a lot of state requirements if you operate a jail. You have to have on-site medical, sleeping area for them. You have to have food capabilities to feed the inmates. It's a very, very high liability section of law enforcement, and I want nothing to do with operating a jail. So it's very, very labor and cost prohibitive. So, and I have my own staffing issues. I will tell you that the jail's staffing issues are much more significant. So, partly because, who wants to spend half of their day inside a jail voluntarily? It's a tough place to work, and those individuals that do that, credit to them, because I couldn't do it.
Is there any other questions? Candace will bring the mic to you.
Yes, ma'am.
How many people do you have end up in jail with going out of the door? What the percentage of people that have committed that kind of crime?
Yeah, on the average, we have probably between 5 and 10 during any given month.
Really?
That are consistently there. But again, it would be tough to predict, what crimes are going to be committed and what of those are going to be resulting in mandatory jail time. With the jail staffing issues, the judges and the jail administration is really working to keep that population manageable for the individuals that they have working. But the reality is sometimes, there's mandatory bookings that we have to do to be in compliance with state law.
I just, visualize Anacortes being such a safe place, and, we're just like walking around the La La Land thinking everything's all good and nobody does anything bad and they're all honest and good people. It's just not that way necessarily.
Yeah, again, we're substantially lower violent crime and serious crime rates than other cities across the state. It is a safe place to be. But that doesn't mean we're immune to all the crime that occurs everywhere else. You know, we see it here, and we do our best to proactively address that before it becomes a bigger issue.
So my question is more specific to the Anacortes Community Forest Lands. What's the strategy if there was multiple fires in the Anacortes Forest Lands, which is probable in the future, with also fires in Fidalgo Island where Summit Park or Lake Erie will respond to, plus fires up in Upper Skagit County? These are all possible that if you can't have the staff to do that, you only can have a strategy. And I understand that Parks works with the fire department to have a 1 hour time frame where you would respond and then you can call DNR. But there is a time in the future where DNR might be tied up because I'm sure they have staffing problems. It's kind of scary to think that could happen, and it could. You wander around the backside of those places and you see, residential areas right up to it. You have fire pits. You have kids back in the back end of Whistle Lake. You have people up around, you have a fire at Little Cranberry. It's not like I'm proposing that this catastrophe could happen, but the probability that multiple fires could be happening at the same time all over the island, which is, western Skagit County, its own Skagit County, where, middle Skagit County would have its problems, and they have a huge exposure up around Blanchard Mountain and all that, because you go up around there, it's all volunteer fire departments and narrow roads. And then you go farther up the county and it's all volunteer. So there is a potential for this to happen. But what would be the strategy that the Anacortes Forest Fire Department would use? And the same thing is on law enforcement. I mean, you go back on those trails, you can't get back there unless you're going to take a motorcycle or something. So the Anacortes Community Forest Land, since it's so big and complex and so vulnerable, I understand it can't be a strategy, or they can't be staffing, but there can be a strategy.
Yeah, that's
a big question.
That was a really big question, but I think I got the most of it. So, yeah, no, you bring up some good points. In fact, I just met with the Parks Department to talk about this just in this last couple of weeks. So there's two portions to that. Obviously, the forest lands themselves are critical, really important to our community, and of course, the interface area where we build into the edge of the forest lands. So they're related, but in a sense, two separate problems. I'll talk about the interface really quickly. A big chunk of that is, you're right, on the wrong day, on the wrong year, we could have a major interface problem with a lot of structures being threatened. We're never going to have the staffing to protect more than a handful of those. So that really comes down to cooperation with the homeowners and the forest land supervisors, and how we, in fact, someone else was asking that question before the meeting today. And I'm trying to bring in this summer a program called Firewise, which has been some of it here in the past and kind of in a cut down version, to where we educate homeowners and work on how to create defensible spaces around those homes. Now there is some, it's not as simple as that, and if we were out in the desert, Firewise teaches like 100-foot area around your home. Obviously we're not going to cut down 100 foot of forest land, so there's also how we protect our homes, where we store our firewood, what we do with our gutters, and all those kinds of things. So homeowner education is a part of the strategy. But from a tactical standpoint, we try really hard to get to those fires as quickly as we can before they get away from us. And those 2 and 4 people crews generally can get them put out pretty quickly. We're lucky in the sense that we're so far north and so far west that our fire problem isn't the same as we see on TV on the east side of the state or in California and things like that. We usually have fires in the duff. They're usually a crawling fire. That being said, it's our job to plan for that what-if year. And was it 2 or 3 years ago, Western Oregon suffered tremendously from one of those years. Now, they're quite a bit further south, but the potential is here. I don't know if I completely answered your question. Hope is not a plan, although we do hope a little bit. But education, rapid attack is a big deal, because I agree with you. On the year that we have a major fire problem on Fidalgo Island, the DNR is going to be committed all over the place. They're not going to be in place.
And you have a new truck you're going to put in service for that.
Excellent. Thanks for the assist. So yeah, so in this last year, we actually had a number of initiatives we've taken on. We upgraded our UTV, so it's faster, bigger, can carry a little bit more material into the narrower parts. We're currently building Type 5 brush engine, which is basically a pickup chassis that carries 400 gallons of water. They can fit up all of the 2-track roads and get us closer with more water to some of the fires. And we're also right now in the process of recruiting a volunteer wildland team to assist us with manpower. So that's where we're at right now.
And you had a question as far as the police side of that. Again, our strategy is to try to be prevention. So when we don't have staffing challenges, the school resource officer I have at the high school and middle school spends his summers in the forest lands just proactively patrolling, making sure that all trail users are abiding by forest land regulations, and just preventing the opportunity for those fires to start.
And since there's a couple of council members in the room, in 2024, I'm going to be asking for a little motorcycle thing too, but we'll cover that later on.
Well, on some of those remote areas, your trucks won't get there.
No, absolutely.
And so if a fire starts in the backside of Whistle Lake, you can't get there. And, if it fans up and goes up, Mount Airy and then blows across, you know how that works.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you could jump fires from forest land to forest land. And, some years it's just tinder dry in there. All it would take is just a little bit. You're facing a number of fires. Then again, you can't staff for it. You can just have a strategy.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Candace?
Just a quick question or a comment and then a quick question. I was struck by the slide that Chief Floyd that you showed where your manpower slide and your office structure slide. And you showed in red where you had 5 vacancies. And don't be fooled by looking at that and saying, well, I think he's adequately staffed if those vacancies were filled, because it will never be filled. I spent 8 years as the sheriff, and I sat there and I go, someday I hope that I'll have all my positions filled. And in 8 years, I never accomplished that. And it wasn't for lack of effort. It never will happen. It takes so long to train somebody that you'd almost have to have no turnover in 2 years in order to fulfill that. And so when you see that and you say, well, if they could just get those 5 other officers, they'd be okay. They won't. They'll always be down. 5 is a lot, but they'll always be down some. And so the staffing is needed. My question for Chief Floyd is, I know there's been changes in the law, especially in the last 4 years since I left law enforcement. And some of the things I've heard is that because of the changes in some of these laws, it's created problems for law enforcement response. And I've heard that there's a situation, I don't live in town, I live just over in Burlington, but I've heard that there's a situation in town where there's some RVs and trailers that create on T Avenue. And I've been told, from officers that have said that's one of our biggest drivers of crime. And there's all kinds of reasons for that, I suspect. But if there was tweaks to the laws that have changed in the last few years, would that help your situation? I imagine it would help a little, but would it help significantly that you would go, maybe I don't need 5 more, maybe I need 3 more? Or would that just really not help that much if there was changes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it would increase our efficiency of some of these tweaks to the laws or that are occurring, like Sheriff Riker mentioned. But the reality is, for our level of presence and deterring some of these things, it's just going to take boots on the ground, and to his other point, full staffing is a unicorn that we are all chasing. I'm not sure it exists. I saw it briefly for about 2 weeks. And then you have to just try to do what you can with what you have. The challenge that he alluded to is our basic academy is 19 weeks. And then out of that, the person comes back for an additional 12 weeks of training with the agency that they're working for. So realistically, to get that person in a car, responding to calls by themselves, it's close to a year. And right now, the wait time to get in the academy, if I hire the person today, if I'm lucky, I can get them into the academy in August 15th. So there's a significant backlog. That's a whole different project I've been working on. So it looks very promising. We have a lot of support from the legislators in our area to bring a basic law enforcement academy to Skagit County that'll serve the North Sound region. So Snohomish, Skagit, Whatcom, Island, and San Juan would all be utilizing an academy location in Mount Vernon. And we have potential to run between 60 and 90 students a year through that. That has dramatic impact on the 250-person backlog that we have right now to get in. They're doing the same thing in Pasco. So Pasco is going to be running 90 students a year. So as the state starts to regionalize and increase their capacity, some of the wait times will diminish, but it's still a 19-week academy. And if you're lucky, a 12-month field training period. We're experiencing a little bit longer field training periods right now with some of the students we have coming back from the academy. I think part of that is just the quality of instruction that they're getting there. The academy has got more than they can handle as far as capacity. They're trying to crank out as many students as they can, and they don't have the appropriate number of staff there to supervise them through the training to the level that we would hope that they would come back with. So it requires a little bit of additional effort on our end when they return from the academy. Does that effectively answer your question, Sheriff? Sure. Okay.
Okay, there's a couple of questions over there.
Yes, ma'am.
It's kind of a funny question, but is there truly an app where my neighborhood has a particular problem during nice weather, spring, summer, student here, it gears up with the high school kids coming and racing up and down our street, and that seems to be their favorite gathering place, and so it's turned into a hobby for most of the property owners to call it. But one of the neighbors did some research and said there's an app that kids can look at and they see when the police are coming. And my house is up high, I've watched this, and call the police, we know that the call is in. And all of a sudden, the kids all leave from the bottom of the street, and lo and behold, there comes the police car sauntering around the corner, and there's nobody there. This just happens all the time. So, does that exist? Is there a way?
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is just something that allows you to listen to the police radio traffic with your phone. So two things for that. One, that capability will go away fairly soon, I'm hoping, because all the agencies in Skagit County are transitioning to digitally encrypted radios. They won't be able to listen. So that'll take care of that. But the other part is when you call, our officers on other calls that are higher priority, and just do we have anyone to send to that traffic complaint? Because while it's important, it's probably less important than some other crimes that may be in progress. And so,
but it's actually gotten really contentious. Some neighbors threaten to throw bricks through their windows and
right. And that's where the proactive police work comes in. If we have the staffing, we've identified that problem, just to work some traffic enforcement in that area. Again, our presence discourages bad behavior for most people. Some people need a little bit more than just the presence and maybe contact from an officer. They need some enforcement to help steer them on the right path.
Well, I'm one of the people that came home one afternoon and found a hook and ladder, 30 neighbors in my yard because one of them had thrown some kind of bomb into my yard. You know, so that's not a good way to live.
Right.
You know, because they're nasty. You know, they're very hostile. Sure, you know, you'll go to jail. We'll report you. It's really a hopeless situation. So I just I don't know what the answer is to it. Send them all to Mars.
Sir, did you have a question in the back?
Yeah, this is directed to the fire department.
That's my favorite kind of question.
It's actually more of a thank you, and if you're doing what I think you're doing. I happen to live on the east end of Chandler Square, and I look out my window at the station number 1, and I've seen several must-be school groups come down with teachers and all, and really quite a few. And they handle the hoses and like the firefighters, all that. Is that part of a program to educate or?
It is, yeah. No, there's a number of community. We go to the schools, we go to preschools. They come do station tours. They do is they come through and they get a talk from the fire officers or firefighters that are on scene in the station, and they talk about safety and things like that. They take them around and they show them the equipment we have and what we do with it. And one of the more important things they do is they show them what we look like and sound like when we're inside all of that gear with the air packs and air mask on, because it can be frightening for a little one, and we don't want them to be afraid. So there's one, we just want them to know who we are. We want them to know that the fire department and the firefighters are a safe place and safe people, and as well as educate them. So yeah, absolutely. Thank
I
you.
have a question. It's not working.
Yes, sir. Oh, now it is.
Do you go and talk to Skagit Valley College with their fire program and try to talk their students into volunteering? Because I know some of them live in this area.
There are some, and actually that hasn't been a formal relationship. We have one of our firefighters teaches over there at the college now, and helps. In fact, we have one young man in our current recruit school that started out in that program. They have relationships with some of the other area departments that have resident programs where they pay them a little bit of money to live in their fire stations and respond. That is something on our radar for the future, but not something we have done yet.
I retired last year from the Northwest Career and Technical Academy. They have a campus here and in Mount Vernon. And in Mount Vernon, there's a fire program, so it might be worth going and talking to the class, because I know that some of the kids, when I was working there, did sign up for the resident situation and volunteer. It's worth a try, I guess. I mean, I know that until this is over, you're tied up with that.
No, but thank you.
I'm going to interrupt for a second. We've got a couple of things. I wanted to just say, I'm going to grab the mic. People can hear me. The reason I'm interrupting is, some of this actually, we might want to talk to your legislators about some of the things that we're dealing with. So I wanted to mention that on Saturday, March 18th, the 40th District legislators are going to be in Mount Vernon from 11 to 12 at the PUD building, which is on Freeway Drive. And then the 10th legislative district, the representatives are going to meet in Oak Harbor, in the Oak Harbor Library meeting room. So it might be worth thinking about talking to them about some of the concerns that you have, because some of it has to do with funding. The other thing I want to mention is we had Ryan and Steve and two other people come and talk about behavioral issues, which we haven't really talked about here, which was, if you're interested in what that was all about and their perspective, there was a YouTube from that was recorded about that, and that's kind of an interesting overlap as well for the problems that the police and fire department have. So anyway, you can hear that meeting and what's going on in that area, which is a little bit definitely an overlap with what they're trying to do with people helping in other areas. The other thing is I want to give, before it gets too late and people run out the door, I want to give Chris Byer a couple of minutes. Do you want to come up and just say hi and that he's the, like I said in the beginning, he's the a union with the Anacortes Professional Firefighters. And so I was hoping he could just take a couple of minutes and
Sweet, thank you.
And the other person that's helping there is Steve Monrad. He's also a firefighter, and he's a community outreach person, and he came and talked to us about some of the community outreach that's going on.
Yeah, I brought Steve here. Sounds like most of you have met Steve, our community paramedic. I also have Jordan Kellington in the back. He's the Police Guild president. So between myself and Jordan, we represent the union labor groups for police and fire. Can everybody hear me okay? There we go. That's it. All right, so I'll be really quick. The chiefs, they eat up all the time. That's it. That's great, yeah. So if you guys haven't seen this sign out yet, this is our campaign sign for the Prop 1, or the Public Safety Levy. We're really excited about this opportunity. It's been a long time coming. I do want to thank Ryan and Christine and Carolyn and all of the city council who have been involved with making public safety a huge priority in the city. So kudos to them, and if you have a chance to thank them, this is a really big deal. So I just kind of want to wrap this up in a nutshell and give you guys, we'll get past the cop one and go to firefighters. Yeah. So yesforsafety.com is a website that the committee has put together, and it has lots of information. There's also a frequently asked questions tab on there that has a lot of good questions that you might have. There's also some get involved buttons or show your support. If you're interested in being somebody who wants to endorse this campaign, you can get lots of information here. You can also reach out to us through this website, and we are willing to meet with you, have conversations, give a presentation to a group of friends or neighbors that you might have. Whatever questions you have, we want to be able to connect you with somebody in our group who can answer those questions for you. So for us as a labor group, it's getting difficult to manage 911 incidents and respond with the appropriate amount of people. There's two sides of that coin. One is getting the appropriate care to the people who need it, and the other side of that coin is doing it safely as a work group where we're not putting our people in danger. So this levy gives us an opportunity to really meet both of those needs, to keep safe working conditions for our first responders and be able to meet the needs of our community. Like Chief had said, we had another record call volume year in 2022 with over 4,000 calls. That's on the heels of a global pandemic, and that really rocked first responders. It was very difficult for us through that year and a half, 2-year cycle. We saw the sickest people in our communities, and we don't get a day off. We're there 24 hours a day. And I think as time has gone on through the last 10 years and our call volumes been rising, we've always been short-staffed, but we've always managed. I use the analogy that we've been kind of bailing out the boat as we go, and it's worked for a long time, but now we have so much water pouring into the boat that we can't bail it out fast enough, and we're starting to sink. And the way I want to put that into perspective is this. As we respond to calls throughout the day, even today, we ran out of units. And I feel like if you called 911 when we're all in service, you're going to get a great response with a strategically located unit that's going to help you out. And that's pretty consistent. But the next person who calls 911 behind you, they're not going to get that same treatment. They're not going to get that same outcome. And when we talk about time equals life, this is a real thing. We see it every single day between heart attacks, strokes, trauma calls, stuff like that. Our ability to get there and intervene with expert medical care is what gives our citizens the ability to have long, healthy lives. So I really just want you guys to understand the importance of that resiliency and depth in the response model. Right now, we just don't have the depth. We're very low staffed comparative to most cities. Between Seattle and the Canadian border, we run some of the lowest staffing in the entire Pacific Northwest. How that affects first responders on the fire side of things is also a unique challenge for us. So as it was stated, the 2-in, 2-out law for Washington State, that is the law. And when we respond to incidents like a fire in your home, when you show up, generally you expect the firefighters to get off the rig and start putting water on the fire. And if there's somebody trapped in that fire, you generally expect them to go in that fire with their gear and rescue that person. So as we arrive, that puts us in a very serious dilemma. We're all sworn to protect you and to sacrifice for you, and that's why we got into this job. But when we get there without, I now have a decision to make, and that's, do I go do what I know needs to be done to protect you, citizens, or your neighbor, or whoever it might be, or do we say the rules are the rules, and we're going to sit here and wait? I think everybody knows what we're going to do, right? But it's not fair to put our first responders in that position when we have the ability to change that by simply voting yes for Prop 1. It's not a huge ask, but it's going to provide hugely better outcomes for people in our community. We see these great outcomes on a daily basis, and I think that's what keeps us so involved in public safety and first responder work. But we also see the other side of that coin. We see the times where we don't have the personnel to respond quickly, and we know what those outcomes look like. And we just want to be able to consistently be there and be available for you guys. So I know that a lot of you have asked about kind of vulnerable populations, and whether it be issues with homelessness or drug stuff. Those are all really good questions, and that's one of the reasons I brought Steve. I want you guys to connect with Steve before you leave here. He's our community paramedic, and he kind of spearheads a lot of that work. But your first responders, the people on the fire engines and the ambulance and the police cars, we're the tip of the spear when those calls come out. And our members do an excellent job at intervening in crises and getting people the compassion and care that they need to medical facilities. We do an excellent job at that. I worked down in the Seattle area prior to working here, and I can tell you that the work that we do is second to none in that field. I like to describe what we do as just trying to do the greatest amount of good in a person's greatest time of need. A lot of the calls we run, you can't fit into a box. It's not always just a fire. It's not always a simple medical call. And not everybody in our community is as fortunate as myself or you guys are potentially. I have lots of family, and I have the ability and means to take care of myself. And some people don't have anyone. But what they do have is firefighters and police officers who are one call away on the phone. And they're always there 24 hours a day. And we show up regardless of what the issue is. And we're going to come to your house and we're going to deal with your problem in a timely fashion. And we're going to provide you the dignity and the respect that you deserve. And we do that across all types of people and all demographics. And I think knowing that is such a huge deal for peace of mind for certain people. And as a community who cares for each other, and we want to love our neighbor, I think supporting first responders and public service is the way that we can show the people in our community that we care about them. And maintain that. So just to wrap it up, I'm here to answer any questions you might have from a labor perspective. We have a lot of support from our city, our council, our chief officers. We've been doing more with less for a long time. And the work that we do is time critical, it's labor intensive, and it's highly technical. So it's not like anybody can just jump in and do that work. It takes special people with special training to do that. So I urge you to vote yes and to support your first responders in the community. If you have any questions, we will relentlessly pursue answers and be there right beside you. I also have a bunch of yard signs, so if anybody wants a yard sign, I'll be posted up right out here, and I'll get those to you, as many as you want. We have a sign-up form. If you want to sign up to be an endorser, you can do that too. But we're all here, and we're ready to answer any questions that you might have.
The levy sounds totally necessary. When do we vote?
Oh, good question. So you're going to get your ballot by mail. It should be in your mailbox by April 7th. It's due on April 25th. And you have ballot box right here at the library. You can mail them in, and there's a few other drop boxes around town. But April 7th should be the date you should expect it. And obviously, we'd encourage everybody to fill those out immediately and get them right back in so we don't forget and they don't get lost in the pile.
Thank you.
And please tell your friends and neighbors about it. I think that's the hardest thing, is getting the word out, and grassroots effort and sharing it with our friends and neighbors, we've found is the most effective way to get all of the details out there and connect people with answers. Go ahead.
Why don't you bring those signs in the room here?
Okay, I'll bring some out. I can bring one in for you. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have to leave that through that door anyway.
All right.
Because we're locked. That's it.
Is that good?
I have one more person. Ryan would like to say just a couple of words about the city budget. He's in the city council. And so that can help clarify some of the money issues maybe.
Thank you, Barbara. Yeah, I'm Ryan Walters. I'm on the City Council. I've been on the City Council now for 12 years, and for 12 years, we've been working on the issue of fire staffing. We've tried different approaches. We've tried negotiating with the county for changes in the service area for more money. We've tried volunteers. One particular council member was a big proponent of trying to solve the staffing problem with volunteers. Volunteers have their place, but they don't staff fire engines and ambulances 24 hours a day. They can't fill that gap, and it hasn't worked. So we have now come to this conclusion that this is what we need to do to solve that staffing challenge. Our story with the police department is a little bit different. We don't have a 12-year staffing problem, but we do have a problem that has been going on for a number of years, and we have a recent increase in crime that we feel like we really must deal with. It's not something that myself, as a city council member, as a representative of you, but also as a person who has a responsibility to protect you. Police Chief Floyd and Chief Harris are the ones who are going to dispatch people to respond to your calls. But it's our job to make sure that they have the resources, the money to make that happen. And it's you who can help us make that happen. Our city budget, the general revenue portion of our city budget, so more or less everything other than the utilities, is $15 million. That's really not a lot of money for all the things that we do. I mean, that funds your library, your museum, your parks. It funds your police department. It funds most of your fire department. We do get some additional funding from the county for the fire department. It funds the mayor's office. It funds the planning department to the extent it's not funded by permit fees. All of those pieces and roads come out of your $15 million general fund allocation. And there's also another sales tax allocation for roads. Of the $15 million, $5 million is property tax, and that's constant. It doesn't increase over time. You saw that 1%. And the 1% means it's decreasing in real dollars and inflation-adjusted dollars all the time. It's reducing our ability, inflation is reducing our ability to pay for the people that we already employ. And so this levy will perform that reset. It will allow us to staff up to the appropriate numbers. And we put this on the ballot with a promise to fund 8 firefighter medics and 5 additional police officers. We calculated it for that amount because we believe that that is strategically what we need to provide that better level of service. And so this money goes to that. It's really important that you all understand that, and so everybody's available for questions. But I do want you to know we have been working on this for quite some time, and that's why all 7 members of your city council have endorsed this. Former Mayor Geer has endorsed this. We have Bonnie Bowers, she wouldn't say her title, but former police chief Bonnie Bowers has endorsed this. And other elected officials, including board commissioners and school board members, because everybody realizes our limitations and how important it is that we get this problem fixed. So thank you all for all of your attention tonight. And one question in the back.
Question for you about that 1% increase. That's the amount that you can raise the budget per year.
That's
and
right.
That's limited by state law, I assume?
That's correct. And it's limited to the property tax amount. So sales tax fluctuates, meaning it goes up when you have more sales. It also goes down in recessions. But property tax is stable, except that it's always going downward in inflation-adjusted dollars.
And so that one chart we saw early on where, inflation's going up 30% over 10 years and we're doing 1% per year.
Right.
And
so I've produced an alternative version of that chart that shows the inflation-adjusted dollars. And even though we also get additional property tax for when new construction is built, it's still declining over a 10-year period because of inflation.
Yeah. So can't we change that state law to?
We can't.
But I mean,
sure.
We as voters can change that at the state level.
Sure. Yeah. All of these are driven by state statutes. So the levy lid lift is a mechanism that's enabled by state statute. The 1% limitation is a restriction created by state statute.
And how often can you do a levy lift?
I guess you could do it whenever you wanted. We have not ever done one in my memory. The city has not. The hospital district has. Other cities have. Oak Harbor did a levy lift, or a levy actually, and a bond last year that together amounted to $1 worth of property tax. We're talking about 36 cents. So, I mean, they also were in even more dire straits than us, but we have run many much larger levies and measures than this in the past here, including for the high school. This is relatively small compared to those, but it's going to make a big difference in our response capability. Chief.
Yeah, just to add on to Mr. Walter's point too, chiefs and sheriffs across the state for over a dozen years now have asked the legislature to give some funding to address some of the staffing issues that we're all seeing across the state. And again, this year, that did not happen. And so one of the reasons that we're asking for this now is I don't think that the state is going to come through anytime soon. And it's up to us to address this issue locally.
All right, thanks everybody. Any other questions? No. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.